Okay, so what we're looking at now is electrical fields, electric fields. It's the unit that comes after gravitational fields. And so we're going to be talking about how these things work, these electric fields. Turns out a lot of the information that we learned were, well, I guess, yeah, a lot of the information that we learned, yeah, in the gravitational fields section is going to come in handy in this electrical fields section. So that'll be cool. Right now, this first unit is going to be called the structure of matter. You can find a couple of practice questions on page 326. So today's learning goal is to review the concept of charge and understand the overall law that dictates interactions between charges. So determine how to charge an object and how the law of charge is used in doing so. All right, so this first section is kind of just a reminder of how charge works. Okay, so the law of charge is that, well, they've got these things. They're called charges. And as it turns out, some of them are positive and others are negative. Or, I suppose, what really it is sometimes, you know, well, people named them positive and then people named them negative. And so that's kind of the idea. So the law of charge says that positive and negatives attract, positive and positive repel, and negative repel. Okay, you can check out the textbook on page 326 in this section here. Shoot, I don't know what chapter this is. Let me just take a quick look. It's unit 3 in the textbook. So what's this, page 326? Just take a quick look at it. Chapter 7. So this is actually chapter 7, 1, section 7.1. You can read section 7.1. It's right there around page 376. Okay, so that's all. Spectacular law of charge. Now, another thing interesting is that some things are conductors and others are insulators, which means basically that conductors allow for the flow of charge, and insulators do not. Huh, pretty cool. All right, and so that's your thing there. Okay. Now, in this particular section, this chapter 7, all of chapter 7, we're really going to be talking about electrical fields. So we're going to be talking about how to produce electrical fields and how they interact with other electric fields and how other things interact with these electric fields. Okay. Excuse me. And one way to produce an electric field is to charge an object, right? And so, how do you charge an object? Well, you can charge some objects through friction. So, you basically kind of like you take some neutral object and some other neutral object, and you sort of, brush them up against each other, and in the end, one becomes positively charged and the other becomes negatively charged. So you've got, neutral, neutral, two neutral objects. You get some friction going on in there. And then later on, you've got some positively charged object and some negatively charged object. Why is that the case? Because during the act of this friction, what happened is some of the electrons in this upper object here, what they did is they jumped off into this lower object. And so as a result, this guy now, who was neutral, he lost a whole whack of electrons to this guy. And so now he's positively charged because he still has his protons, and over here he's got, a lot less electrons anyway. Oh, and I forgot to mention up here that it's the proton that is positively charged, and it's the electron that is negatively charged. I'm pretty sure you guys know that from somewhere. Somebody told you that once. The funny thing about it is that they are exactly the same charge as far as nature, or as far as science goes. Like, they are precisely the same amount of charge, but exactly opposite. Spectacular. Their masses are quite different, and we'll talk about those masses as they come up. Okay, you can charge things by contact. So let's say I again have some neutral object, and then I've got some positively charged object. Okay, and then they go ahead and they touch each other. So I basically take this neutral object and I push it over so that they touch. Okay, and then I go ahead and I remove them from each other. What happened is that positively charged object, during the contact, what happens is it sucks some of the electrons from this neutral object. And now, because this guy lost electrons, he's slightly positively charged, and this guy is less positive, and this guy is less neutral over here. Okay, so this guy came from neutral, went to positive because he lost some electrons to here. Why? Because the electrons are attracted to this positive scenario. Okay, so that's charging by contact. You can also charge by induction. So this is an interesting one. The cool thing about induction is you've got Earth, or what's called the ground, or some really large supply of electrons, or a really large area where you can dump electrons. Okay, and basically the Earth is apparently a really nice place to store a bunch of electrons, or to get a bunch of electrons if you need them. So they call it the ground or the Earth. And what you have is you have some sort of neutral object, right? And it's sort of sitting there, floating. Then you've got some positive object that's sitting over here. And you bring this positive object in there really close, but you don't actually touch the neutral object. Okay? And what's going on is, right as it gets in here close, this neutral object is positive, right? So what's going to happen is all of the electrons in this neutral object, they're going to kind of get pulled over to this side. And they're going to be like, oh man, there's a positive object over there. As soon as this positive object touches over here, we're going to go ahead and jump over. So I'm going to get in line. So these electrons are like hanging out way up here in this corner. Okay? And they're all sort of like, waiting. And then all of a sudden, you take a wire and you attach it to the ground. And all of a sudden, there's a bunch of electrons down here in the Earth. And since all the electrons in this thing are way up here, you basically have this positive area down here because all these electrons moved up. So now all these electrons in the Earth, they're going to get pulled up through here into this, because this first electron that was in this wire, Remember, this is like a neutral wire, too. This first electron, he kind of steps over because he's like, oh, there's some positive area over here. I'm going to go hang out. And then so since that electron jumped over, then the other one's going to jump over and jump over. And all of a sudden, you're going to get some kind of flow going on through here. So a ton of electrons ended up flowing into this thing. Okay? And now, all of a sudden, what you do is boom, you cut the wire. And all of a sudden, you've trapped a bunch of electrons in this now neutral, what was a neutral object. Okay? And that's the act of charging by induction. Okay? So, that's basically section 7.1. It talks about the law of charge, conductors and insulators, and how to charge objects. Section 2 will discuss Coulomb's law and how it has some similarities with some other things we've learned in the past.